Regarding the structural integrity of towers, I can only speak from my own experience, which is pretty vast. I once did an inspection tour where I did 147 towers in 45 days in 25 states. We went from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada. We went from California to Ohio and every place in between. And I would do 3 or 4 towers a day. One day I did 8. I've climbed, I think, miles of tower. They were self-supporters, monopoles, guy wires. And we were on this tour because these towers belong to a certain company. And by law, these towers have to be inspected periodically. A guide wire is 3 years and a self-support's 5 years. You take about 300 pictures of every tower. You ascertain what's wrong with the tower. And there are degrees of this. It's like, you should really pay attention to this. This needs to be fixed. This is damn dangerous, okay? And lots of gray in there. But you make a recommendation to the people who hire you to inspect their tower. Say, okay, these things, need to be fixed. And of course, part of that is you're hoping to get work out of these things. You've done, 147 towers. You could pick up jobs, whether it's beacons or wire tensioning, and they range from 150 feet to 2,000 feet. And not one tower didn't have something that needed attention. And that's fine, they're old. Whether it was a cable grab, which is the life support system of a climber, or a mistension guy wire, which would put your tower out of kilter, or very bad rotting rust on the base bolts of a self-supporter. There were things almost everywhere that needed to be done. So you take your pictures, you send in the reports, so you work 12 hours a day, then you go to a hotel, you write up your reports, and you send the package in on a daily basis. And then you wait. Job is done, all good. And what I figured out is these reports we wrote up and sent in, a copy of every one of those reports has to go into the site house of that tower in a book about that thick, with the loose leaf book that you open up with the binder, a binder book. And I started to notice towards the end of this tour that all the recommendations I made on this tower, say it's a self-supporter, 5 years back ago, some other inspector made the same recommendations. 5 years before him, some other inspector made the same recommendations. That's 10 years now. Did they fix any of it? No, nothing. So I'm thinking, well, apparently by law, you have to inspect the towers, but is there a law saying you have to fix them? Do you have to fix them? And some of this was egregious. I'm on a cable grab going up 400 feet on a guy wire. I get to the top and realize that the cable grab is secured with a screwdriver stuck through it. That's dangerous. That's dangerous, no matter how you climb. I once had to traverse on a monopole below the crow's nest to a ladder through a hatch, and I had a free climb. There's the only way through it. I couldn't tie off because I couldn't untie myself. So I climb up the ladder, and I get to the top. The ladder is secured with a dog leash. A leather dog leash is holding this ladder. That's just some of the things I've seen. Let's just say that on every one of these towers, something needed to be attended to. They were informed they had to be attended to, and they didn't do a damn thing. And I just wonder, they probably weren't compelled to do so. It wasn't the law that they do it. And that means that the safety of these towers then is up to the discretion of whether or not they want to spend a buck on it. And that's what I gleaned from my inspection tour. It was a big eye-opener, man. Big eye-opener. I began tower work like anybody else. You go sideways into it. Nobody ever wakes up and says, I'm going to be a tower hand. I had a friend who started a small company at the very beginning of the cellular boom. A van, a little trailer, and 4 guys. 1989, I stopped in 2017, so about 28 years. Not solid, off and on, mostly on, but if I added it all up, I'd say I got 20 years in. I never dreamed about writing a book about it until one morning, got a call to Moulton, New Jersey from Kansas. Drove all the way to Ramsey, New Jersey in one night, and I got in Jersey. It was 4 a.m. I went to a diner. I opened the USA Today, and there's a story in there about 2 guys who died on a cell phone tower about a mile from where I lived in Kansas. I'm like, this is crazy. And I looked into it, and when I found out more of the story, I was like, this shouldn't happen. There's something wrong going on out there. These were experienced guys. This was not pilot error. The more I looked into what was happening in the field, the more I decided there was something seriously wrong in the tower industry for the amount of deaths per 100,000. Because that's how OSHA does it. Deaths per 100,000, whether you're a cop, a soldier, a fireman, an ice road trucker, crab fisherman. And at that point in time, the highest death rate in the country per 100,000 was tower workers. That's insane because there ain't a lot of them. At the time, say late 90s, there might have been 8,000 to 10,000 actual tower hands working in the United States. It's probably more now, of course. But you think about the labor size and the amount of death, that's incongruous. That shouldn't be happening. The more I delved into it, the weirder it got. And there are reasons for that. And that was the impetus for the book. That's what started me writing the book, was that. Those two men, Jerry Case and Kevin Keeling, out of Missouri, working in the state of Kansas. Went up one day, came down too fast. I'm not going to tell you stories I've heard from other people, though they're true. There are horror stories out there that we all know. If you want to talk about the deaths, go look at them. Hundreds, right? Horrific deaths. Many of them preventable. Not all of them. In many cases, as we know, it's pilot error. It's climate related. It's people not following that training. But then again, were these people trained in the first place? Were they? Most of them weren't. You go back to the impetus of this stuff and say, well, if these people were correctly trained, this never would have happened, and that's true. Why weren't they correctly trained? Because there's more work than people can handle, and they're throwing people out there who shouldn't be out there. There's no basic training. They didn't go through basic. They didn't go through basic. They were thrown into the field with a rifle and said, go shoot. My first day on the job, I climbed the tower. You know, I had no training whatsoever. But that was back in the day, as they say, where everybody free climbed. You know, you could wear shorts and a tank top. One lanyard, that's it. If you ask me, what it needs is an apprentice program that you have to pass that says, now you can climb a tower. Make the people who want the work done pay for the training. Because when they throw this on the contractor, these are small companies. They lay out tons and tons of money in trucks, equipment, personal, PPE, right? And then, you know, you want them to send these guys halfway across the country for a training, ComTrain training class? Well, yeah, fine, pay for it. Pay for it. And then you'll get a better worker in the field, and you'll get more production, and you'll get a happier worker, and you'll get less fatalities. My humble opinion. I wanted to make change. I wanted it to be Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, and a radio station in Chicago called it that. It was a modern-day jungle, which was the biggest compliment I had, because what Sinclair did is he went into the meatpacking industry, and he said, there's something wrong here, and he wrote a book about it, and it changed the industry. I didn't think I'd do that, but I did want to make people understand what it takes for them to do that text, make that phone call, a convenience that no one can live without anymore. It is the most game-changing thing in the world since the invention of fire is the cell phone. And face it, it is. And nothing comes close to what this is. How important it is to people's everyday lives, but there's a blood price for it that I wanted them to understand. So getting back to your question would be this. You just can't throw rookies up a tower because you need it done. These people need an apprenticeship program. I think they should be unionized in some way or affiliated with the union, but as most of us know, unionizing tower dogs is like putting ferrets in a wetsuit. It's almost impossible because they are such a brand of rebels and renegades. They are really individuals, you know, and to their own detriment, right? They hate to be a part of a group that would actually help them. I really believe that. What's in their best interest, they don't want to hear about. Let's just get the work done, you know. Don't be a pussy. Let's get the work done. I think there should be a program funded by the big players. By that I mean major carriers. The major carriers and the major turret vendors should put money into a fund specifically for training They should pay for upgrades and safety equipment. If you're going to want everybody to have a new cable grab or a new type of lanyard or a new retractable that you must have, then you pay for it. Don't make the company absorb that, because these guys are working on razor-thin margins. And they're working on razor-thin margins due to the fact, not that, as I've learned earlier, that the carrier's not paying all this money. It's that all the middle management, all the way down to the 4 guys who go up that tower, are taking huge chunks out of it. So what's ever left over is chicken feed for these men on the ground. So that, and just make a pay scale. This is the minimum for your first 6 months. Then you get a bump. Then you go to here. If you're here for a year, you get that. And another thing was, you got to make per diem commensurate with the real world. When I was in the field, our per diem barely covered a motel room. Barely. And when you got 2 or 3 guys in a motel room just to cut costs, it's not a healthy situation. And then you got to eat. Now, it shouldn't pay for your beer or your strip club or your cigarettes or your pool, but per diem should pay for a place to live and 3 square meals. And it doesn't today. It doesn't even come close. So you get that raise in per diem, a decent wage commensurate with an apprenticeship training down the line. Would be, to me, it might be Pollyannish, it might be a dream, but would it be logical? Because that's what the big, strong unions in this country do. They protect their workers, right? And they put the onus of that protection of their workers on the people who are hiring them. We have these spates where nothing happens, but that's usually when there's a slowdown in production. There's a slowdown. When they do a kick-in, when a new G comes in, watch the death rate skyrocket, because they're throwing people out there that shouldn't be there. A 17-year-old kid with a summer job in a man basket in Iowa. Cable breaks, 3 guys come down. Name was McMillian. Beautiful kid, right? Didn't even start his life. Now it's over. Not his fault. I am not a stress engineer or design engineer, but I've been on my share of towers. And at the time of my book was published, there were approximately 250,000 communication towers in the United States. That means towers basically built for cellular communication, AM, FM, television, microwave, 911, emergency services, CIA, FBI. These are real towers. But in addition, they're mounting stuff on 500,000 other structures, whether they're church steeples, hotel roofs, high schools, water towers. If it has elevation, they will slap weight on it because it's money. The people owning the structure get a rental fee. The company gets their, what's the word I can't find here? Their coverage. All these towers, many of them were built in the 50s. Many of them were built 75 years ago, and they're still being used. They were designed to hold a certain amount of weight, period, right? And they keep adding and adding and adding. You'll see a monopole, a 120-foot monopole, got 5 carriers on it. It's Verizon, it's T-Mobile, it's all the way down the line. That, to me, is an overloaded structure. There's a simple way to put it. You wouldn't overload a bridge, right? You wouldn't do it. You wouldn't overload a circuit board, right, or a breaker box in your house, but you'll overload a tower. And these towers are rated, like I said, they're rated very specifically by very smart people for a certain amount of weight and a certain amount of wind load. And they have to be installed in a certain way. But when you go slapdash shoving 5 carriers on a tower that was really made for 1, maybe 2, you're exceeding the limits of what this tower can handle. You used to be able to pick up an antenna on your shoulder and climb it up a tower. They were that light. It was 1 antenna, 2 connections on the bottom. That was it. That may weigh 35, 40 pounds. Now, these systems we're building on a piece of pipe, they can get over 300 pounds. This boom arm was rated for maybe 150 pounds of antenna, and they just shoved another 700 pounds onto this thing. And I was walking out, and I stepped on a bracket, and the bracket went, and I went boom, and the whole tower just whong, whong, whong. And I remember that vividly. I climbed myself back up, Came down the tower, walked to the truck. There was a site guy there, said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm never going back up there again. You can take me out of this one. You can take me out of this one. Fix it. And I'm going to tell them, none of us are going up this tower again until you fix it." Actually, on that inspection tour, there were 4 or 5 of those that we called in and said, you got to fix this because this thing ain't going to make it. Whether they did or not, I have no idea. It's not often these things come down due to those overloads. It happens. And men who die on those are the ones that are totally innocent of what's happening. They didn't make a mistake. They didn't pull this tower down. They didn't screw up. They just happened to be there at the wrong time. And there's dozens of these instances across the country where these epic failures in structure occur.